He gave 4 women unlimited black credit cards to test their hearts, but the woman who never asked for anything was about to change his life forever. What Adrian Sterling discovered that night would shake the foundations of everything he believed about love, loyalty, and the true cost of wealth. Hello, my wonderful family. I'm your brother, Mr. Harrington. May the Almighty cover your homes with mercy, bless your children with wisdom, and heal every broken heart among us. May joy never leave your household, and may your love always be protected. Each story I share is my offering of love and strength. Watch until the end, and together we'll keep this family strong. If your soul is with us, write present. If you walk with love, write I am with Mr. Harrington. Make sure to subscribe so you never miss the next powerful story we share. I put a lot of effort into researching, editing, and the production of these cinematic stories. So please support me by subscribing, like, and share this video, so together we can reach more beautiful minds like yours. Tonight, we enter the world of Adrian Sterling, a man whose wealth could buy kingdoms but whose heart had been shattered by betrayal. 4 beautiful women would compete for his fortune, each given unlimited power to spend. But the woman who would steal his soul was the one person in his mansion who had never asked for a single thing. The Sterling estate that night was a cathedral of wealth and power, its marble floors reflecting chandeliers that cost more than most people's homes. Crystal champagne towers sparkled like frozen waterfalls, and the air itself seemed to shimmer with privilege. 4 women stood in that ballroom, each draped in gowns that could fund a small country's education system, waiting for the man who controlled more money than some nations possessed. Adrian Sterling entered like a king surveying his kingdom. 35 years old, his tailored black suit cut from Italian silk that whispered luxury with every movement. His piercing blue eyes held the cold precision of a man who had learned that sentiment was a weakness the world would exploit. Every line of his face spoke of control, of power wielded with surgical precision. The newspapers called him the Empire CEO, but they had no idea of the fortress he'd built around his heart. His wealth stretched beyond comprehension. Hotels in Dubai, tech companies in Silicon Valley, shipping empires that crossed every ocean. But money, Adrian had learned, was both blessing and curse. It attracted beauty, sophistication, charm, and underneath all that glitter, the hungry wolves who saw him not as a man but as a prize to be won. Trust was a luxury Adrian Sterling could no longer afford. But in the shadows of this glittering world moved someone who was never meant to be part of the story. Amara Johnson glided through the mansion's corridors like morning mist, her presence both essential and invisible. 28 years old, she possessed a beauty that didn't demand attention but commanded respect. Her warm brown skin seemed to glow with an inner light, and her dark eyes held depths of wisdom that came not from privilege but from struggle. Amara had been invisible to this world for 3 years. Just the head housekeeper. Efficient, reliable, forgotten. While others saw only her pressed uniform and quiet movements, Amara carried something infinitely more valuable than all the diamonds sparkling in that ballroom. The weight of real sacrifice, the strength that comes from loving others more than yourself. Every morning at 5, she rose in her small Brooklyn apartment and prepared for another day of serving a world that would never see her as anything more than help. But Amara wasn't working for herself. Every dollar she earned flowed like a river to those she loved. Her younger brother Malik, brilliant and determined, fighting his way through Columbia University on scholarships and prayers. Their mother Grace, battling diabetes in a cramped Harlem apartment, the medical bills arriving each month like storm clouds threatening to drown them all. While the women in designer gowns spoke of art collections and vacation homes, Amara folded their discarded clothes and thought of tuition payments. While they complained about the vintage of champagne, she calculated how many shifts it would take to cover her mother's next doctor visit. This was her reality, beautiful, brutal, and real. Adrian had been betrayed before, and the wounds ran deeper than any physical scar. Women had whispered promises of forever while secretly planning their exit strategies, their love always conditional on the size of his bank account. So he devised a test that would strip away all pretense, all performance, all lies. For women from his social circle. For Black American Express cards with no limits, No restrictions, no boundaries. He wanted to peer into their souls and finally see what unlimited money would reveal about their true character. Would they indulge in every luxury? Would they prove that love in his world was just another commodity to be bought and sold? The test would give him his answer. Among the chosen was Isabella Rodriguez, a Spanish art dealer whose gallery was the crown jewel of Manhattan's art scene. She moved with the fluid grace of a dancer, her every gesture calculated for maximum impact. Her beauty was undeniable, but Adrian sensed something predatory in her perfect smile. Catherine Fairfax represented old American aristocracy, her family name carved into the foundations of New York society. She wore her breeding like armor, every word chosen to remind others of her pedigree. But beneath the polished exterior, Adrian detected the emptiness of someone who had never truly wanted for anything, and therefore had never truly valued anything. Sophia Chun had built and sold 3 tech startups before her 30th birthday, amassing a fortune that would humble lesser mortals. She spoke passionately of changing the world, of using technology to solve humanity's greatest challenges. Yet Adrian noticed how her eyes gleamed when she discussed market dominance, how her humanitarian speeches always circled back to profit margins. And then there was Clarissa Davenport. Beautiful, ruthless Clarissa with her platinum blonde hair that caught light like spun gold and blue eyes as cold as Arctic ice. She had been orbiting Adrian's world for 2 years, sometimes his lover, always his equal in ambition. Clarissa never pretended to love him for anything but his wealth and power, and in some twisted way, Adrian almost respected her honesty. She wanted his ring, his name, his empire, and she had never lied about it. But Clarissa possessed something that made her more dangerous than the others: intelligence. She understood that Adrian's test wasn't just about spending money, it was about revealing character. While the others might indulge in obvious luxuries, Clarissa would play a deeper game. She didn't see Amara as competition, because how could a maid threaten someone of her caliber? That blindness would prove to be her fatal mistake. The 4 women departed that evening with their unlimited cards and elaborate plans. Isabella spoke of acquiring a Picasso she'd coveted for years. Catherine mentioned commissioning a private jet for her upcoming European tour. Sophia discussed investing in a revolutionary AI startup. Clarissa simply smiled and said she would surprise everyone. While the chosen 4 flaunted their newfound financial freedom, designer jewelry that cost more than houses, vintage cars that belonged to museums, exclusive mansions that redefined luxury, Amara continued her quiet life of service and sacrifice. Days blended into weeks as the test unfolded. Adrian watched from his tower office as reports filtered in of his contestants' spending sprees. The amounts were staggering even by his standards, but it wasn't the money that interested him, it was what their choices revealed about their hearts. Until one night, when everything changed. Adrian was leaving his office after another 18-hour day when he discovered Amara in the mansion's service entrance, exhausted after pulling a double shift covering for a sick colleague. She carried 2 small grocery bags, her tired shoulders bearing the weight of responsibilities he couldn't imagine. Her uniform was still crisp despite the long day, her dignity intact despite her exhaustion. In a moment that was part impulse, part curiosity, and part something he couldn't name, Adrian approached her. The woman who cleaned his messes, who knew his schedule better than his own assistant, who had been invisible for 3 years, suddenly seemed to glow in the dim hallway light. "Amara," he said, and she startled, not expecting to encounter her employer at this hour. "What would you buy if money was no object?" It was meant to be a casual question, perhaps even a gentle joke after the extravagances he'd witnessed from the other women. But as Adrian handed her one of the black cards, more out of whim than intention, he saw something in her eyes that stopped his breath. Terror. Not excitement, not greed, not the calculating gleam he'd grown accustomed to. Pure terror. Amara stared at the card as if it were a live snake. While other women had dreamed of diamonds and yachts, private islands and designer wardrobes, Amara's mind raced to a different place entirely. Malik's final semester tuition bill. Her mother's mounting medical expenses. The stack of overdue notices on her kitchen table that kept her awake at night. For 72 hours, the card remained untouched on Amara's dresser. She went to work, performed her duties, and tried to forget that salvation lay within reach. But on the fourth morning, as she opened another medical bill that might as well have been a death sentence, Amara made her choice. What happened next would shake Adrian Sterling to his very foundation. Instead of indulging in wealth, instead of treating herself to luxuries she'd only dreamed of, Amara quietly used the card to pay her family's debts. Every medical bill, every tuition payment, every overdue notice. She didn't buy herself a single thing, not a dress, not a meal, not even a coffee. Just sacrifice, pure and simple, love in its most devastating form. When Adrian saw those receipts, pages of medical payments, tuition transfers, utility bills, prescription costs, something cracked inside his chest. For the first time in years, he questioned everything he thought he knew about love, loyalty, and the true measure of a human heart. But Clarissa Davenport had eyes like a hawk and instincts like a predator. She sensed the shift in Adrian's attention, noticed his gaze lingering on the woman who was supposed to remain invisible. She saw how his entire demeanor changed when Amara entered a room, how his voice softened when he spoke to her. Rage burned in Clarissa's veins like acid. She had clawed her way through New York society to stand at Adrian's side, had played every game, made every sacrifice, eliminated every rival. She wasn't about to let a maid steal the crown she'd spent years earning. Clarissa Davenport had never lost a battle she intended to win. And she didn't plan to start now. Would you have trusted them at this point? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one. Rage burned in Clarissa's veins like molten steel, each heartbeat pumping fury through her perfectly sculpted form. She stood in her penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park, her manicured fingers gripping a crystal wine glass so tightly the stem threatened to snap. For 2 years, she had positioned herself as Adrian Sterling's equal, his match in ambition and ruthlessness. She had eliminated rivals with surgical precision, navigating the treacherous waters of high society to claim her place beside the most powerful man in the city. And now a maid, threatened to destroy everything she had built. Clarissa had clawed her way from modest beginnings to the pinnacle of New York elite through sheer force of will and calculated charm. Her father had been a small-town banker who taught her that money was power, and power was everything. Her mother had shown her how to smile while plotting someone's downfall. These lessons had served her well in the glittering battlefield of Manhattan society. She wasn't about to let Adrian Sterling's momentary fascination with his help ruin years of careful planning. Clarissa began to dig like an archaeologist uncovering buried treasure, except she was hunting for ammunition. Into Amara's background, her family history, her financial struggles, her every vulnerability that could be weaponized. She hired private investigators, called in favors from society contacts, and used every resource at her disposal to build a case against the woman who dared to capture Adrian's attention. What she discovered was both disappointing and infuriating. Amara Johnson's life was an open book of sacrifice and virtue. No scandals, no hidden affairs, no secret addictions or shameful past. Just a woman working multiple jobs to support her family, attending night classes to better herself, volunteering at a local community center on weekends. It was almost sickeningly pure. But Clarissa knew that everyone had secrets. She just had to dig deeper. Meanwhile, Amara found herself caught in an emotional hurricane that threatened to tear her carefully constructed world apart. In her small Brooklyn apartment, she sat on her worn sofa staring at the bank statements that showed her family's debts had vanished overnight. The relief should have been overwhelming, but instead she felt terrified. Gratitude for Adrian's unexpected kindness warred with a growing awareness that she was stepping into quicksand. His world of limitless wealth and casual luxury was as foreign to her as Mars, and just as dangerous. She had seen what happened to women who dared to reach above their station. They fell harder than anyone else. Yet something was growing in her heart that she dared not name. When Adrian looked at her, really looked at her, she felt seen in a way that had nothing to do with her uniform or her duties. For fleeting moments, She forgot the vast chasm between their worlds and remembered what it felt like to be simply a woman in the presence of a man who stirred something deep in her soul. Adrian Sterling was forbidden territory, a man whose very existence in her life was an impossibility. He lived in penthouses while she rode the subway. He bought companies while she bought groceries. He commanded empires while she cleaned floors. And yet, for the first time in his life, the billionaire CEO's heart was beating for someone who had never sought his fortune. But the Sterling empire held secrets darker than its polished marble floor suggested. In the mansion's library, behind first-edition volumes and priceless artifacts, lay documents that told a different story than the one the world knew. Adrian's wealth hadn't been built solely on business acumen and calculated risks. It carried the weight of family betrayals, corporate manipulations, and choices that had cost him pieces of his soul. His father, Harrison Sterling, had been a titan of industry who ruled his family with the same iron fist he used to crush business rivals. Adrian had learned early that love was a weakness to be exploited, that trust was a luxury that could destroy everything you'd worked to build. The scars ran deeper than anyone knew, shaping him into the controlled, distant man who trusted bank statements more than beating hearts. His mother, Elena, had been the one bright light in his childhood until she discovered Harrison's affairs and left one winter morning when Adrian was 12. She tried to take him with her, but Harrison's lawyers and limitless resources had ensured that Adrian remained in the Sterling mansion, a prisoner of privilege who learned that even mothers could be bought or beaten. These wounds had created the fortress around Adrian's heart, the armor that no woman had ever penetrated. Until now. Until a quiet maid with gentle hands and genuine heart began to crack the walls he'd spent decades building. For the first time, someone was seeing past the money, past the power, past the carefully constructed image of the empire CEO. Amara looked at him and saw not a conquest or a prize, but simply Adrian, flawed, wounded, human. The test was revealing exactly what Adrian had expected from his chosen contestants. Isabella had purchased a private art collection worth $30 million, not for love of beauty but for the prestige of owning what others could only admire from museum walls. Catherine had commissioned a yacht longer than a city block, equipped with everything from helicopter pads to wine cellars stocked with bottles that cost more than most people's homes. Sophia had invested in a dozen startups, playing venture capitalist with unlimited funds, each investment chosen not for potential good but for maximum publicity value. She appeared on financial talk shows, gave interviews about her philanthropic vision, all while the receipts showed purchases of jewelry, cars, and mansions that revealed the truth beneath her humanitarian mask. Their greed was spectacular in its obviousness, their shallowness as transparent as glass. They had failed Adrian's test so completely that he felt almost vindicated in his cynicism about human nature. Almost. But their materialism was nothing compared to the storm Clarissa was about to unleash. She struck like a serpent, targeting its prey's most vulnerable spot. Whispers began circulating through the household staff like poison in the water supply. Clarissa had connections everywhere, society wives who loved gossip more than truth, domestic agencies that supplied workers to Manhattan's elite, even other household staff who could be bought with promises of better positions or threats of lost employment. "She's using him," Clarissa murmured to anyone who would listen, her voice carrying the authority of someone who belonged in Adrian's world. "Playing the innocent act to get what she wants. You didn't see how calculated it was, how she positioned herself to be discovered that night. Poor Adrian doesn't realize he's being manipulated by someone far more cunning than any of us." The lies spread like wildfire through the networks that connected Manhattan's domestic workers. Suddenly, Amara found herself facing sidelong glances from colleagues who had once considered her family. The other housekeepers whispered when she passed. The gardeners avoided eye contact. The kitchen staff grew silent when she entered their domain. The isolation was crushing. These people had been her support system, her found family in a world that often felt hostile to someone like her. Now they looked at her with suspicion, wondering if she was really the gold-digger Clarissa painted her to be. Amara began to question herself in the dark hours before dawn when doubt whispered loudest. Was she wrong to accept Adrian's help? Had she somehow crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed? Was she truly different from the others, or had Clarissa seen something in her that she refused to acknowledge? The weight of scrutiny pressed down on her like a physical force. Every interaction with Adrian became fraught with awareness that others were watching, judging, reporting back to Clarissa. The natural ease she'd once felt in his presence evaporated, replaced by stilted conversations and careful distance. But Clarissa's cruelest weapon remained hidden, a devastating secret she'd uncovered in her relentless investigation into Amara's past. Something that could shatter not just Amara's reputation, but her entire sense of self. Something that would prove to Adrian that even the woman he'd begun to trust was hiding dangerous truths. The night of the final reveal was approaching like a hurricane on the horizon, and Clarissa was ready to deploy the nuclear option that would eliminate her rival once and for all. She had discovered something about Amara's family history, something buried so deep that even Amara herself might not know the full truth. In her penthouse, Clarissa smiled as she reviewed the documents her investigators had unearthed. This revelation wouldn't just destroy Amara, it would vindicate every cynical belief Adrian held about human nature. It would prove that everyone, even the most innocent-seeming souls, carried secrets dark enough to poison love. The final reveal would be more than a conclusion to Adrian's test. It would be Clarissa's coronation as the only woman clever enough, ruthless enough, honest enough to stand beside Adrian Sterling. Do you believe love can survive this kind of betrayal? Share your thoughts. Your voice matters to this family. The night arrived like destiny itself, inevitable and electric with possibility. The Sterling Estate's grand ballroom had been transformed into a theater of judgment, its crystal chandeliers casting rainbow prisms across marble floors that reflected the faces of Manhattan's most powerful families. Every chair was occupied by someone whose net worth could fund small nations, their eyes gleaming with anticipation for the spectacle about to unfold. Adrian Sterling stood at the center of it all, his tailored tuxedo a study in controlled elegance, his face an unreadable mask that had taken years to perfect. Tonight, he would announce his choice. Tonight, the Empire CEO would reveal which woman had won the ultimate prize, his heart, his name, his empire. The four contenders arranged themselves like chess pieces on a board of their own making. Isabella Rodriguez wore a crimson gown that flowed like liquid fire, her dark hair swept into an elaborate updo that showcased diamond earrings worth more than most people's homes. She smiled with the confidence of someone who had never truly been denied anything she desired. Catherine Fairfax embodied old money elegance in midnight blue silk, her posture speaking of generations of breeding and privilege. Every pearl in her necklace had been chosen to complement her ice blue eyes, and her smile carried the certainty that birthright would triumph over new money aspirations. Sophia Chun had selected a gown that was both sophisticated and subtly provocative, its modern cut speaking to her status as a tech innovator who had conquered Silicon Valley before her 30th birthday. She wore her success like armor, confident that intelligence and ambition would prove irresistible to a man of Adrian's caliber. But it was Clarissa Davenport who commanded the room like a queen surveying her domain. Her platinum blonde hair caught the light like spun moonbeams, her figure encased in a gown of pure white that proclaimed her virtue while hinting at the fire beneath. She had positioned herself closest to Adrian, close enough that their history was evident to everyone watching, close enough that her victory seemed predetermined. Clarissa had spent the afternoon in preparation that went far beyond choosing the perfect dress. She had rehearsed her triumph speech, imagined Adrian's proposal, planned their engagement announcement that would dominate society pages for months. Tonight, she would claim the crown she had spent 2 years earning through careful manipulation and strategic positioning. But in the shadows of this glittering spectacle moved the woman none of them considered competition. Amara Johnson served champagne to guests who looked through her as if she were invisible, her black uniform a stark contrast to the rainbow of designer gowns surrounding her. She moved with the same quiet grace that had defined her 3 years in this house, efficient and unnoticed. Yet something had changed in Amara's bearing. Gone was the uncertain woman who had questioned her worth in the face of Clarissa's attacks. The weeks of whispers and cruel speculation had burned away everything except the core of who she truly was, a woman whose love was not conditional on circumstances, whose strength came not from privilege but from purpose. She knew that her sacrifice had already revealed everything that mattered. The choice she had made with Adrian's card spoke louder than any dress, any speech, any performance could ever hope to achieve. She had shown him her heart without artifice, without calculation, without agenda. Whatever happened tonight, she had given him truth in its purest form. As Adrian prepared to speak, his eyes swept the room with a calculating gaze that had built empires and destroyed competitors. He saw the expectant faces, the held breaths, the barely contained greed that lurked behind cultivated smiles. These people had come to witness a transaction disguised as romance, a merger of fortunes masquerading as a matter of the heart. But then his gaze found Amara across the crowded room, and everything else faded into background noise. Clarissa sensed the shift like a predator sensing danger. She had watched Adrian's growing fascination with his maid with the cold calculation of a chess master seeing her victory threatened by an unexpected move. But Clarissa had prepared for this moment, had discovered the weapon that would destroy her rival and vindicate her own ruthless pursuit of power. She stepped forward before Adrian could speak, her voice carrying clearly across the hushed ballroom. "Before you make your decision, Adrian, I think everyone here deserves to know the truth about all the contestants in your little game." The room held its collective breath as Clarissa smiled with the satisfaction of someone about to deliver a killing blow. She had uncovered Amara's deepest secret, the shame that would prove she was no different from any other woman seeking to climb society's ladder through a rich man's affections. "Your maid, your Cinderella story," Clarissa's voice dripped with mockery, "comes from a family that has been taking charity for generations. Her father abandoned them when she was 12, leaving her mother to raise 2 children on welfare and food stamps. She's been working multiple jobs since she was 16, not out of noble sacrifice, but out of desperation. She accepted your card not because she's different from us, but because she's more desperate than any of us could ever be." Clarissa paused, letting her words sink in like poison seeping through soil. "She's nothing more than a charity case who saw an opportunity and took it. At least the rest of us are honest about wanting your money." The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the soft clink of crystal glasses as hands trembled with shock. Clarissa had expected to see shame wash over Amara's face, expected to watch her rival crumble under the weight of exposed desperation. Instead, something extraordinary happened. Adrian Sterling's face transformed as understanding flooded through him like dawn breaking over a long night. What Clarissa thought was Amara's weakness revealed itself as her greatest strength. The truth she had exposed wasn't shameful, it was beautiful beyond anything he had ever encountered. Here was the story of a 12-year-old girl who had stepped into her father's abandoned role without complaint, who had sacrificed her childhood to become her family's protector. Here was a teenager who had worked multiple jobs while maintaining perfect grades, not because she had to, but because she refused to let circumstances define her family's future. Here was a woman who had cleaned houses and served others not from desperation, but from the kind of love that transforms suffering into purpose. Adrian saw Clarissa for what she truly was, everything he had learned to fear and despise in the women who had surrounded him all his life. She was calculation masquerading as passion, ambition dressed up as devotion, greed wearing the costume of romance. She had tried to destroy Amara with the very qualities that made her extraordinary. And he saw Amara for what she had always been, everything he had been searching for without knowing it existed. She was strength without arrogance, love without agenda, sacrifice without expectation of reward. She was the answer to questions he hadn't known he was asking. The man who had tested women with endless wealth realized that the woman who had captured his heart had never asked for a penny. Adrian's decision shocked the room into a silence so complete that the ticking of antique clocks became audible. He didn't choose Isabella with her calculated charm. He didn't select Catherine with her impeccable breeding. He ignored Sophia with her impressive achievements. He looked past Clarissa with her cruel beauty and ruthless ambition. Instead, he began walking across that ballroom with the purposeful stride of a man who had finally found his way home. Past the gasping elite who couldn't comprehend what they were witnessing. Past the stunned society ladies whose carefully constructed worldview was crumbling in real time. Past Clarissa's face, which had transformed from triumphant confidence to pure rage in the span of seconds. Every step carried him further from the world of transactions and closer to something he had never believed possible: authentic love offered without conditions or calculations. He walked to the woman who had been invisible to everyone except him, the woman whose quiet strength had illuminated the darkness he had carried for so long. "Amara," he said, his voice carrying across the silent room with the authority of absolute certainty. "You never needed to pass any test. You had already won my heart." The ballroom erupted in whispers that buzzed like a disturbed hive, but Adrian and Amara existed in a bubble of perfect silence where only they could hear each other. Her eyes filled with tears that had nothing to do with shame and everything to do with the overwhelming relief of being truly seen, truly valued, truly loved for who she was rather than what she could provide. Clarissa's face twisted with a fury that stripped away every pretense of civility she had ever worn. Her carefully constructed mask cracked completely, revealing the calculating predator beneath the society beauty. But her power over Adrian was broken as thoroughly as glass striking stone. She had played her final card and discovered too late that she had never understood the game. The other women realized with dawning horror that they had never truly been in competition. The game had been won before it began by someone who wasn't even trying to play. Their expensive gowns and practiced charms suddenly felt like costumes worn to the wrong party. Isabella's confident smile faded as she understood that all her sophisticated manipulation had been meaningless. Catherine's breeding and connections proved worthless in the face of genuine character. Sophia's impressive achievements paled beside the quiet heroism of a woman who had sacrificed everything for love. Adrian Sterling learned that money could reveal greed, but only the heart could recognize love. All his wealth, all his power, all his carefully constructed tests had been unnecessary. The answer he sought had been present from the first moment, wearing a simple uniform and carrying burdens that would have crushed weaker souls. 6 months later, the Sterling estate looked exactly the same from the outside, but everything within had been transformed by love. Amara no longer worked as a maid in these halls. She stood beside Adrian as his equal, his partner, his heart made manifest in the world. The transformation went beyond changing her role in his household. Adrian had discovered that loving Amara meant supporting not just her but the family she cherished. Malik graduated summa cum laude from Columbia University, his brilliant mind now focused on law school with the financial pressure that had haunted his studies finally lifted. Their mother Grace received the best medical care available, her diabetes managed by specialists who treated her with the respect and attention that every human being deserved. But more profound than any financial change was the way Amara had found her place in a world that had once made her invisible. She brought dignity to every room she entered, not because her circumstances had changed, but because someone finally saw the dignity she had always possessed. The society ladies who had once looked through her now found themselves seeking her approval, drawn to the genuine warmth that no amount of money could purchase. The household staff who had briefly turned against her under Clarissa's influence now served as protective guardians of the woman who had shown them that character mattered more than status. Adrian Sterling had searched for love by testing women with wealth, creating elaborate scenarios designed to reveal true character. But love had found him through a woman who valued sacrifice over luxury, family over fortune, and dignity over diamonds. She had needed no test because her entire life had been an examination in the qualities that truly mattered. In quiet moments, when they walked through the gardens where she had once tended flowers as part of her duties, Adrian marveled at the simple truth that had eluded him for so long. The greatest treasures were found not in what people took from life, but in what they gave to others. Clarissa had disappeared from their world as completely as if she had never existed, her cruelty and calculation exposed for all to see. The other contestants had learned hard lessons about the difference between performance and authenticity. But Adrian and Amara had discovered something infinitely more valuable than victory in any game. They had found each other. Do you think they made the right choice in the end? Would you have had the courage to love across such different worlds? My beautiful family, this story reminds us that true love sees beyond wealth, beyond status, beyond the wall society builds between us. In a world that often judges worth by bank accounts and status symbols, Amara and Adrian discovered that the heart recognizes treasures that money cannot buy. Amara's sacrifice touched Adrian's heart because it came from love, not greed. While others spent millions on themselves, she used his gift to heal the wounds that kept her family suffering. Her quiet dignity spoke louder than any words, her actions revealing a character forged in the fires of real struggle and genuine devotion. This story teaches us something profound about the nature of authentic love. Clarissa believed that manipulation and calculation could win a heart, that beauty and ruthlessness were enough to secure lasting devotion. But true love cannot be conquered. It can only be recognized, honored, and cherished. Remember, in your own life, the people who truly love you will never need to be tested. Their actions will speak for themselves in moments when you're not looking, in choices they make when no one is watching, in sacrifices they offer without expecting recognition or reward. Adrian learned that the woman worth loving was not the one who performed love most convincingly, but the one who lived love most authentically. Amara never auditioned for his affection. She simply was herself, and that self was extraordinary enough to transform a man who had given up on the possibility of genuine connection. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe, like, and share so we can reach more beautiful souls like yours. Write "Love wins" in the comments if you believe true love always finds a way through even the most impossible circumstances. Until our next story, may love protect your home, and may your family always be blessed with the kind of authentic connection that Amara and Adrian discovered. May you recognize the treasures that walk beside you every day, and may you have the courage to love without conditions, just as they did. I am your brother, Mr. Harrington. Stay strong, stay loved.